It was the kind of night that made the city feel both alive and empty at the same time. Snowflakes drifted lazily from the sky, covering streets and sidewalks in a soft, white blanket, muffling the usual hum of traffic. Streetlights cast a golden glow on the frozen ground, and the air smelled like cold steel and winter smoke. I had never been a fan of winter nights, especially when I felt lost, broken, and completely invisible. But that evening, as I trudged through the park, the weight of everything in my life pressed down on me like the heavy coat I was wearing. I had just turned 62. Not that it should have mattered, except that it did, at least in the way the world had treated me. That night, I felt invisible in a way I hadn't felt since my youth, except now, the invisibility was different. It wasn't the carefree kind you get when no one notices your small mistakes. This was a deep, gnawing emptiness. A life carefully built over 40 years, a marriage, children, routines, and countless compromises all seemed to vanish in a single, cruel moment. 3 days ago, my husband Robert had left me, just like that. He had chosen someone younger, someone full of energy and excitement, someone who reminded him of what he thought he had lost in himself. I remember the cold realization sinking into me as he walked out the door, dragging our shared life behind him like an old, unwanted coat. I had spent hours frozen in our living room, staring at the wall, thinking of what had gone wrong, wondering if I had ever mattered at all. That night, I didn't just feel rejected, I felt discarded. Not as a wife, not as a mother, not even as Sarah, but as someone completely irrelevant. I wandered through the streets, my mind a storm of confusion, anger, and grief. And somehow, without realizing it, I found myself in the park, the same park I had visited countless times in my youth, but tonight it felt alien, almost menacing. The trees stood silent, their branches heavy with snow, and the empty benches whispered memories I wasn't ready to confront. I sat down on a cold metal bench, trying to wrap my mind around my new reality. The snowflakes fell on my hair and coat, melting slowly, leaving tiny, icy trails on my face. I shivered, not just from the cold, but from the overwhelming sense of loss. All those years of effort, all the love and care I had poured into my marriage, into my family, felt wasted. And I wondered, with a sharp pain in my chest, if it was too late to start over. And then, unexpectedly, someone approached. He was tall, with a presence that somehow commanded attention without trying. His coat was expensive, the kind that seemed to absorb the light around it, and he moved with a grace that made the park seem less desolate. He stopped in front of me and smiled, a simple, unassuming smile, not the kind designed to charm, but the kind that made you feel seen. "Are you okay?" he asked gently. I looked up at him, startled. His eyes were kind, not the kind that measured you or judged you, but the kind that simply observed. I opened my mouth to speak, but no words came. My heart, racing from grief and surprise, seemed almost to forget its pain for a moment. I'm fine," I managed finally, though my voice trembled. He didn't push. He simply sat down on the bench next to me, giving me space, letting me exist without expectation. And somehow, in that quiet companionship, I felt a small thread of warmth, a reminder that not everyone had abandoned me. We sat there for what felt like hours, watching the snow fall, talking very little. But even in the silence, there was something profound. I realized that my life, which had felt like a series of endings, might not be over. Not yet. And maybe, just maybe, something unexpected could happen here on this frozen bench. It was then that he noticed my coat. "That coat looks warm," he said, nodding toward me. "It is," I replied, adjusting it around my shoulders. "But it's old." He smiled again, softly, almost knowingly. "Sometimes old things carry more than warmth. They carry memories, history, purpose." I laughed quietly, a bitter little sound. "Purpose? I don't have any left." "You do," he said simply, and that's when something strange happened. For the first time in days, I wanted to believe him. We started talking then. About life, about loss, about those moments that break you and those rare moments that remind you why you still matter. I told him about Robert, about how he had left me for someone younger, someone who seemed to fit perfectly into the life he wanted, leaving me behind. I didn't hold back the pain, the anger, the humiliation. He listened. Really listened, no interruptions, no advice, no platitudes, just genuine attention. And I realized as I spoke that I hadn't been heard like this in decades. That in itself was shocking, almost revolutionary. Someone had noticed me not as a number, not as a wife or a mother, not as a problem to fix, but simply as Sarah. And then he said something that changed everything. You're extraordinary, he said quietly, almost as if testing the words in the air before letting them settle around us. You don't realize it yet, but the way you care, the way you've survived, the way you keep going, that is extraordinary. I laughed, a hollow, incredulous laugh. Extraordinary at 62? Abandoned? Who would call me extraordinary? Someone who sees people, he replied. Not numbers, not statistics. You. His words lingered, filling a space I didn't know existed inside me. And in that quiet moment, I felt something shift. Not completely healed, not suddenly happy, but a flicker of possibility, a spark that whispered, maybe your life isn't over. He stayed with me until the snow slowed to a whisper. And just before leaving, he handed me something, a simple business card. Think about this, he said, smiling. It might be the beginning of something you never imagined. I watched him leave, my heart still racing, clutching that card. I didn't know what awaited me, but for the first time in days, I felt alive. The frozen park, the biting cold, the weight of my grief, all of it seemed suddenly manageable because something unexpected had appeared in my life. A person who saw me, truly saw me, and believed in me. I went home that night, staring at the ceiling, turning the card over and over in my hands. The name printed on it was foreign to me, Matthew Randall, but the possibility it represented was overwhelming. I thought about what it meant, about how one night, one moment of genuine human connection could shift the trajectory of an entire life. And as I drifted into an uneasy sleep, the snow continuing to fall outside my window, I realized that life, even at 62, could surprise you in ways you never expected. That maybe, just maybe, the end of one life could be the start of an entirely new one. And I had no idea how close I was to discovering that truth. The morning after that snowy night in the park, I woke up with a strange mix of emotions. My heart still raced when I thought about Matthew, the man who had somehow seen through my despair and recognized something in me I had long stopped believing existed. At 62, after 40 years of living life for others, of being a wife and mother, I had almost forgotten who Sarah really was. Yet here was someone telling me, without hesitation, that I was extraordinary. I couldn't eat breakfast. Coffee burned my tongue as I tried to focus, my mind replaying the conversation, his words, that simple business card lying on the table. What did he want from me? Why had he chosen me, of all people? I had no professional experience beyond being a secretary for most of my life. How could I possibly be of value to someone like him, someone who seemed so successful, so untouchable? But the card sat there, whispering a challenge. Call me, it seemed to say. Your life can be different. Your life can matter. I spent the day in a fog. Calls from Robert went unanswered, which was unusual for me. Normally, I would have picked up out of habit, out of some desperate need to keep a familiar connection alive. But after the park, after Matthew's words, something inside me had shifted. Robert's presence, once central, now seemed like a shadow of my old life, a life that no longer fit. By mid-afternoon, curiosity overwhelmed fear. I dialed the number on the card. Hello, his voice was calm, warm, and carried that same quiet confidence that had disarmed me the night before. Hi, it's Sarah, I said, my voice slightly shaky. Sarah, he repeated, like the name itself held meaning. I was hoping you'd call. We spoke for a while, briefly, lightly, though the air was thick with the weight of possibility. He asked me to meet him at his office to discuss something important. My first instinct was to refuse. After all, what could I, a 62-year-old woman with no executive experience, offer someone like him? But a small, rebellious part of me, the part that had been silent for decades, insisted, go, just see what happens. The office was a glass tower in the heart of the financial district. I had always seen such buildings from afar, symbols of power, of success, of worlds I had never entered. And now here I was, stepping into that world, dressed in my modest winter coat, feeling both invisible and painfully exposed. Matthew greeted me at the lobby. He was as composed as ever, but there was a warmth in his eyes that made my nerves settle just enough to breathe. Thank you for coming, he said. Please come to my office. His office was on the top floor, panoramic windows showing the city stretched out below. It was beautiful, sterile, intimidating, yet somehow, being there didn't feel oppressive. It felt possible. He gestured for me to sit. I wanted to speak to you about something important, about the work I do, about the people I've met, and about you. I nodded, unsure how to respond. You see, he continued, leaning forward slightly, I run the Randall Institute. We fund projects, support communities, try to make a difference where it matters. But he paused, looking out the window. We've never really seen the people behind the numbers. Programs, budgets, statistics, they're all fine on paper, but the real impact, the real stories remain invisible. I listened, intrigued despite my doubts. And I've been running a little experiment, he said, finally looking back at me. to see if there are people left in this world who act out of genuine compassion, who care more about others than themselves. For the last 3 months, I've tested strangers, observed reactions, watched people choose. And you, his eyes softened, you stood out. My stomach flipped. Me, I don't understand. You gave me something that mattered, he said. Something rare. That night in the park, you gave me a coat. You were freezing, yet you gave without hesitation. You didn't know me. You didn't gain anything. That is not just kindness, Sarah, it is sacrifice. And that is the quality I need for the work I do. I looked down at my hands, worn and wrinkled, feeling suddenly exposed. Matthew, I don't have experience in any of this. I've been a secretary all my life. How could I manage multi-million-dollar programs? You would learn, he said, leaning back, confident but reassuring. And you wouldn't be alone. I have an entire team of professionals who handle the technical aspects. What I need is someone with heart, someone with empathy, someone who sees people, not numbers. That isn't taught in a university, Sarah. That comes from life, and you have it. Tears pricked my eyes. Not just from his words, but from the realization that someone had truly seen me, not my past, not my age, not my mistakes, but the essence of who I was. Why me? I whispered. You must have found other good people during your tests. I found people who tossed coins, people who said good luck and walked on. One woman bought me a sandwich. Those are gestures of kindness, yes, but they cost nothing. You gave when it cost you. That is what matters. My chest tightened. The memories of Robert's betrayal and the crushing sense of uselessness returned, but this time, instead of despair, there was possibility. He leaned forward. I want you to work as Director of Community Relations for the Randall Institute. You will visit projects, talk to beneficiaries, help us understand where real differences can be made. You will see the work we fund, evaluate, improve. And if you succeed, Sarah, I want you to expand, lead, transform everything. I see that potential in you. I sat frozen. The offer was staggering. More than Robert and I had ever earned together in our best years. And yet fear surged through me. What if I failed? What if I couldn't handle it? What if I made a mistake that ruined lives? He seemed to read my mind. Then we adjust and try again, but I believe in you. That night when you told me about your husband leaving, the pain you carried, I saw something extraordinary. Decades of wisdom, of compassion, of strength. You chose to help even while suffering. That is rare, Sarah. That is extraordinary. Tears fell and I wiped them hastily, trying to gather my composure. I need to think, I said. You have all the time you need, he replied gently, placing the card back on the table. But know this, that night changed me. You reminded me that genuine goodness exists. That is worth more than you can imagine. I left his office that day, clutching the card, my mind spinning. My life, which had seemed over, was suddenly full of possibilities I hadn't dared to imagine. A new path, a chance to be seen, to matter, to make a difference. It was terrifying, exhilarating, impossible. The next 3 days were a whirlwind of emotion. I debated endlessly with myself. Was I too old? Did I have what it took? Could someone like me truly make a difference at this scale? And yet, every time I thought of that frozen bench, of the snow, of the warmth of genuine human connection, I felt a spark, a whisper that this could be the beginning of something remarkable. On the third day, while watching the snow melt outside my kitchen window, my phone rang. It was Robert. My instinct was to ignore it, but something in me answered. Sarah, his voice sounded broken, tired. Can we talk? I met him at a neutral location, a small downtown coffee shop. He looked haggard, remorseful, a shadow of the man who had left. He tried to explain, to apologize, to reason. But I listened with a calmness I hadn't known I possessed. My decision, though not yet spoken aloud, had already taken root. You discarded me for someone younger, I said finally, my voice firm. And now that choice has blown up in your face, you want to come back. That life, it's over for me. I want something new, something mine. He was silent for a moment, absorbing the truth, and in that silence, I realized something profound. My life was no longer his to control. 3 days later, I dialed Matthew's number. My hands trembled, but my voice was steady. Yes, I said simply, I accept the position. The rest of the day passed in a haze of disbelief and exhilaration. My life had shifted in ways I couldn't yet comprehend. I wasn't just a discarded wife or a secretary, I was Sarah. And for the first time in decades, that identity felt powerful, capable, and alive. The morning of my first day at the Randall Institute arrived like a storm of emotions. I woke up before the alarm, my heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and sheer terror. For decades, my mornings had been predictable: coffee, newspaper, the familiar hum of routine. But today, routine had vanished, replaced by something uncharted, something that could change not just my life, but the lives of countless others. As I dressed carefully in my modest business attire, I caught my reflection in the mirror. The woman staring back at me was older than most people starting new careers. Wrinkles traced my face, and my gray hair had a stubborn streak that refused to yield to dyes. Yet her eyes that had seen heartbreak, disappointment, and loss, sparkled with an energy that hadn't existed in years. I straightened my back, lifted my chin, and whispered to myself, "You can do this. You have to do this." The drive to the institute was a blur of city streets, towering buildings, and my racing thoughts. I tried to imagine what awaited me: the staff, the offices, the programs, the projects. I had read about it in brief reports, glanced at charts, and seen snapshots of communities on the organization's website, but nothing could truly prepare me for the reality. When I arrived, I was greeted by Patricia, Matthew's assistant. Efficient, composed, and quietly assertive, she led me through the lobby and up the elevators, giving me a concise orientation along the way. "Miss Sarah, welcome. Mr. Matthew is in a meeting, but he asked me to show you around and introduce you to the team," she said. The institute occupied the top 3 floors of a glass tower in the financial district. Floor by floor, I saw offices humming with activity, conference rooms filled with data charts, and walls adorned with framed photographs of successful projects. But despite the apparent success, there was a sterility to it, a sense that while much was being done, something essential was missing: the human connection. Patricia introduced me to the 10-member team that managed program approvals, monitoring, and reporting. Polite smiles greeted me, but I sensed skepticism lurking behind polite expressions. Who was this 62-year-old woman with no executive experience suddenly taking a leadership position? Could she handle the responsibility? Could she understand the complexity of managing millions of dollars worth of philanthropic programs? I didn't have answers yet, but I had a determination that I had never felt before. By lunchtime, Matthew returned. He invited me to his office for lunch, a simple affair of salads delivered by his assistant, and began to share his vision. "The problem with traditional philanthropy," he said, gesturing toward the city skyline, "is that it's distant. Decisions are made in offices about communities that no one truly understands. We fund programs, allocate resources, and then review the results through spreadsheets and reports, but we never see the people whose lives are impacted. We never hear their voices." I nodded, intrigued. "So, what do you want me to do?" I asked cautiously. "You will go into the field," he explained, leaning back, confident yet gentle. "You will visit the projects we fund, talk to the people we're supposedly helping, and bring their reality back to the institute. If something isn't working, we fix it. We improve. That's what I need. Someone who questions, challenges, and ensures that our efforts are meaningful." The following afternoon, we reviewed current projects: schools, community centers, housing programs, job training initiatives, all well documented with statistics and progress reports. But as I read, I noticed the same issue Matthew had highlighted. The numbers were abundant, but the stories were absent. Names, faces, emotions, they were all missing. "Who are the people we're helping?" I asked, pointing to a report on a vocational training center. "What are their real challenges? Did they get jobs? Did their lives improve?" Matthew's eyes lit up with approval. "Exactly, and to be honest, we don't know. No one has visited this center in years. Everything is based on paper." The next day, we drove to the San Juan Job Training Center, located in one of the city's humblest neighborhoods. The streets were narrow, lined with small shops and homes that had seen better days. The center itself was tidy, organized, and well-maintained, but the real test would be understanding the people who walked through its doors. We spent 3 hours talking to instructors and students. Maria, a 35-year-old woman taking a sewing course, shared a frustration that was never mentioned in reports. "The courses are good," she said, "but most of us can't get jobs afterward. Companies want experience, and we have no way to get experience without a first job. It's a vicious cycle." Raphael, a young man juggling 2 part-time jobs to support his family, wanted to learn computer skills but could never attend classes because of the center's rigid hours. "I would love to take the course," he explained, "but by the time I get off work, it's closed." I scribbled notes furiously, my mind racing with solutions. Extended hours, partnerships with local businesses for internships, flexible class schedules, these were small adjustments, but they could transform lives. On the drive back, Matthew was thoughtful, almost silent. "We invested $2 million here," he said finally. "And yes, it helps some people, but it could help so many more. You're seeing what I never have. That is the point of this position. You're not just observing, you're transforming." And transform we did. Over the following weeks, we visited project after project. In the housing program, we discovered many homes were inadequate for larger families. In community health clinics, hours were inconvenient for working adults. In school meal programs, children arrived hungry because they had no breakfast at home. Each observation led to actionable change. Redesigns, extended hours, nutrition programs, partnerships with local businesses, volunteer training. With every adjustment, I felt a surge of purpose I hadn't experienced in decades. Each success story became fuel. The seamstress opening her own shop, the young man becoming a junior programmer, families living in homes that met their real needs. Back at the Institute, my suggestions were initially met with skepticism. Some staff questioned whether someone without formal experience could truly lead these decisions. But as we presented results, improved employment rates, better school attendance, healthier families, increased community satisfaction, the skepticism turned to admiration. I realized something profound. Leadership wasn't about age, title, or experience. It was about empathy, listening, and a willingness to act when others hesitated. I had spent decades putting others first my children, first my husband, first my routines. Now I was putting humanity first in the truest sense of the word. Robert tried to contact me multiple times during these weeks, but I ignored most calls. When I finally answered, I was clear. "There is nothing to discuss," I said. My life had moved beyond the past, beyond what he had destroyed. I had discovered something new, something he could never take away. 3 months into my role, Matthew called me to a meeting. This time, it wasn't just the two of us. 3 members of the board awaited, eager to meet the woman transforming the Institute. Dr. Beatrice, an elegant woman specializing in social development, spoke first. "Sarah, your work in these 3 months has been remarkable. The effectiveness of our programs has increased by 40%. The community's feedback is overwhelmingly positive. You've done what many of us thought impossible." Matthew smiled. "Sarah, we want to expand the Randall Institute. Double the budget, nationwide programs, and we want you to lead as executive director, not just community relations, but everything." I froze, trying to process the magnitude of what I was being offered. 6 months ago, I was a discarded wife. Now I was being entrusted with shaping the future of an entire philanthropic institute. I need a moment," I said, excusing myself. I looked at my reflection in the restroom mirror. The woman staring back wasn't the same woman who had sat on that frozen bench in the park. She was someone who had faced loss, heartbreak, and rejection, and transformed it into strength, insight, and courage. When I returned, I looked at the board and said simply, "Yes, I accept." From that moment, my life was no longer dictated by what had been lost. It was defined by what I could create, influence, and change. And for the first time in decades, I felt a sense of purpose so deep it made fear irrelevant. Stepping into my new role as executive director of the Randall Institute felt like stepping into a storm. The title alone carried weight, responsibility, and expectation. Walking into the office that morning, I felt every eye in the room on me. Staff who had once questioned my capabilities now looked for direction, for leadership, for proof that this 62-year-old woman could handle millions of dollars worth of programs. I straightened my shoulders, took a deep breath, and told myself that fear had no place here. This was not about proving myself to them. It was about proving to myself that I could do what I was born to do. My first order of business was reviewing all ongoing programs in meticulous detail. Job training centers, housing initiatives, school meal programs, community health clinics, everything. I read reports, audited data, and cross-checked every statistic. But the numbers, impressive as they were, told only part of the story. As I had learned in San Juan, true insight came from understanding the people behind those numbers. I began by visiting more communities personally, accompanied sometimes by Matthew, other times alone. Each trip revealed new realities. At one job training center, I met Claudia, a woman in her 40s learning to start a catering business. She had talent, drive, and ambition, but no way to finance her initial inventory. I realized that the Institute's approach, which provided courses but no follow-up support, left people like Claudia stranded. What good was training if the tools to use it were inaccessible? In the housing program, we discovered more than structural flaws. Some homes were designed without considering extended families, resulting in crowded living spaces for parents, children, and grandparents. Simple changes, adding extra rooms, revising layouts, could transform these houses into homes. In health clinics, we discovered that weekend and evening services were non-existent, meaning working parents couldn't bring their children for checkups. And in schools, morning meal programs were inconsistent, leaving children hungry before their first class. I started prioritizing changes that would make a measurable difference in people's daily lives. We extended training center hours, partnered with local businesses for internships, redesigned houses, added evening and weekend health services, and implemented consistent school meal programs. Each adjustment seemed small on paper, but its impact was enormous. Families were no longer struggling to fit services into their lives. They were being met where they were in their reality. Back at the Institute, I faced resistance. Some staff doubted the necessity of such hands-on involvement. Others worried about budget constraints. But I had Matthew's support, and more importantly, I had a vision. I presented each change with data and anecdotes from the communities themselves. I showed not just statistics, but stories, Claudia's catering venture, a family finally comfortable in a redesigned house, children arriving at school with full bellies. It was a revelation for everyone. Suddenly, numbers weren't just numbers, they were lives. People began to see the importance of empathy-driven leadership. They began to understand that our role was not just to fund, but to empower. One of the first pilot projects I initiated was a microcredit fund for small entrepreneurs in needy communities. Unlike traditional charity, this wasn't about giving handouts. It was about providing tools and support to help individuals build sustainable businesses. We offered low-interest loans, guidance, and mentorship. I spent weeks meeting potential candidates, understanding their skills, challenges, and dreams. There was the seamstress in San Juan who wanted to open her own shop, the baker in another district who needed professional equipment, and the teacher determined to start tutoring classes for underprivileged children. The first round of funding was nerve-wracking. Could these individuals succeed? Would the fund be used responsibly? What if it failed? But the response was overwhelming. Within months, businesses flourished. The seamstress opened her shop, the baker bought equipment and began hiring locals, and the teacher's tutoring program expanded beyond her expectations. The success rate was nearly 85%, far surpassing national averages. Each story was a testament to the power of dignity-driven philanthropy. As the months progressed, I became more confident in my role. Meetings with the board evolved from tense updates to strategic discussions. We brainstormed new projects, explored innovative solutions, and expanded our reach. Matthew continued to be a guiding presence, not a boss, but a partner in vision. He trusted my judgment and encouraged bold action. Meanwhile, the media began to notice. Local newspapers ran stories about the Institute's transformation, and interviews highlighted the innovative approaches we were implementing. Communities praised the tangible improvements in their daily lives. I was no longer just an administrator, I was a visible advocate for meaningful change. However, this newfound success brought personal challenges. Robert continued trying to contact me, leaving messages full of remorse and longing. Friends and family expressed concern about my intense workload and the emotional toll of community work. But I knew my life had changed irrevocably. I could never go back to the passive existence I once had. One evening, after visiting a particularly struggling community center, I returned to my office exhausted but exhilarated. Matthew met me with a quiet smile. "You're doing more than I imagined possible," he said. "You've already transformed the Institute's approach, and it's only been a few months." I smiled, feeling the weight of responsibility, but also the thrill of accomplishment. "We're just getting started," I replied. "There's so much more to do. Every community has different needs, and every story deserves attention." It was during these intense weeks that I began to understand the real meaning of leadership. It wasn't about making decisions in isolation or managing people from a distance. It was about listening, observing, understanding, and empowering. It was about giving people a chance to succeed on their own terms, rather than imposing what we thought they needed. And then an unexpected moment of clarity struck me. Walking through a bustling community center filled with children laughing, families interacting, and local entrepreneurs discussing projects, I realized something profound. This was the life I was meant to live. I had spent decades following routines, adhering to expectations, and living for others. But now I was living for purpose, for impact, for human connection. The journey wasn't easy. Challenges persisted, obstacles emerged, and sometimes progress felt painfully slow. But with every success story, every smile, every transformation, I felt an energy and fulfillment that no stability or security had ever given me. 3 months after becoming executive director, the board called another meeting. This time, it was not to review performance, but to discuss the future of the Institute. They proposed a significant expansion, doubling the budget, launching nationwide programs, and entrusting me with full leadership. The offer was staggering. Just 6 months ago, I was a woman discarded and overlooked. Now I was being asked to guide an entire organization dedicated to changing lives. For a moment, I allowed myself to imagine the possibilities. Communities thriving, entrepreneurs succeeding, children with brighter futures, families living with dignity. And I realized that all of this had started with a simple act of kindness. The coat I had given that fateful Christmas Eve, an act of empathy that set everything in motion. The boardroom was quiet as I stepped in. I could feel the weight of their expectations, and more importantly, the weight of my own ambitions. The proposal was bold, ambitious, and terrifying. Double the Randall Institute's budget, launch nationwide programs, and place me in full executive control. I paused, letting the gravity of the offer sink in. For a moment, I saw the path I had walked, the frozen bench, the night in the park, the moment I gave my coat to a stranger. Each step, each act of empathy had led me here. And now, I had the chance not just to change a neighborhood or a city, but to influence the lives of thousands across the country. Matthew's eyes met mine across the table. There was encouragement, trust, and an unspoken confidence in me that I had not yet fully internalized. I took a deep breath and nodded. "I accept," I said, my voice steady but filled with emotion. The room erupted with smiles and applause. I felt a surge of adrenaline and excitement, the kind that makes your heart race and your mind expand simultaneously. The first weeks of planning were intense. We needed a structure that could handle rapid growth while remaining true to our core mission: empathy-driven, dignity-focused, community-centered philanthropy. I spent hours with department heads, mapping out strategies, identifying potential pitfalls, and setting ambitious but achievable goals. My office became a hub of activity, buzzing with phone calls, emails, and strategy sessions. One of the first nationwide initiatives we launched was the Community Innovation Fund. The idea was simple yet revolutionary. Rather than simply providing grants, we would empower local leaders to identify the unique needs of their communities and design solutions accordingly. This required training, mentoring, and oversight, but the potential impact was immense. I traveled from city to city, meeting community leaders, attending town halls, and listening. Every conversation revealed challenges I had never anticipated: cultural barriers, logistical issues, resistance to change, and pockets of deep mistrust from communities who had been promised help before and left disappointed. At a rural town in Montana, I met Thomas, a school principal struggling to keep his after-school program running. Funding had been inconsistent, volunteers burned out, and children's participation waning. I listened to his story, observed the program firsthand, and realized the simple but critical changes needed: consistent funding schedules, better volunteer support, and community engagement workshops. Within months, the program was thriving, and Thomas later told me, "You didn't just give us money, you gave us hope and structure." That sentence stayed with me. Hope and structure, two simple words that captured the essence of what we were building. In another city, I visited a community health initiative that had been struggling to serve immigrant populations. Language barriers, mistrust, and lack of transportation had rendered the program largely ineffective. I worked with local volunteers to set up translation services, mobile clinics, and community ambassador programs. Slowly, people began attending appointments, seeking preventive care, and sharing their stories. One mother, holding her child in the waiting room, told me tearfully, "For the first time, I feel like someone sees me in my child." That moment reinforced my belief that true philanthropy was never about numbers, it was about connection. Meanwhile, back at headquarters, the expansion brought internal challenges. Staff were stretched thin, communication lines strained, and mistakes inevitable. There were disagreements about priorities, budget allocations, and program designs. I learned quickly that leadership required not just vision, but patience, diplomacy, and resilience. I scheduled weekly strategy meetings, encouraged open dialogue, and emphasized that mistakes were opportunities to learn rather than failures to punish. Slowly, the team began to coalesce, united by a shared commitment to making a tangible difference in people's lives. One of the most complex projects was launching the National Microcredit Initiative. Unlike local pilot programs, this effort required coordination with banks, legal frameworks, and compliance across multiple states. I spent days in meetings with financial institutions, drafting policies that balanced accountability with accessibility. Our goal was to provide entrepreneurs not just loans, but mentorship, training, and ongoing support. The first recipients were a diverse group: a single mother opening a daycare in Detroit, a veteran launching a small woodworking shop in Arizona, a young immigrant starting a tailoring business in New York. Each story was unique, each challenge different, but the underlying principle remained the same: dignity through empowerment. Watching these individuals take ownership of their success was profoundly rewarding. As the months passed, media attention grew. Articles highlighted the Institute's innovative approaches, and social media buzzed with stories of successful entrepreneurs and transformed communities. I found myself interviewed on radio shows, podcasts, and even national television. I spoke not just about programs or numbers, but about vision, empathy, and the power of seeing people, not statistics. But the work was not without personal cost. Exhaustion became a constant companion, and I often found myself reflecting late at night, questioning decisions and worrying about missed opportunities. The weight of responsibility was heavy, but every time I visited a community and saw lives changing, I felt rejuvenated. I realized that fulfillment often comes wrapped in challenge. Matthew remained a steady presence, offering support and perspective without micromanaging. Our relationship evolved, deepening with shared purpose and mutual respect. We celebrated successes together, analyzed setbacks, and planned strategically for the next steps. The personal connection gave me strength, but I remained mindful of maintaining professional boundaries in a rapidly expanding organization. One of the most rewarding aspects of this nationwide expansion was witnessing the ripple effect. Local leaders trained through our programs began mentoring others, creating a self-sustaining cycle of empowerment. Communities once reliant on external aid started innovating independently, proposing solutions, and advocating for themselves. I realized that our success wasn't measured by the amount of money we invested, but by the independence, confidence, and creativity we fostered in others. 6 months into the national rollout, we faced a major test. A natural disaster struck a small coastal town where we had recently launched programs. Homes were damaged, businesses disrupted, and families displaced. The Institute needed to respond quickly. I coordinated emergency aid, partnered with local authorities, and mobilized staff and volunteers. Within days, temporary shelters were set up, food and medical supplies delivered, and rebuilding initiatives planned. While we couldn't prevent the disaster, our rapid and compassionate response mitigated suffering and reinforced trust within the community. Through all this, I felt a transformation within myself. The woman who had sat alone on a frozen bench, discarded and uncertain, had become a leader who could inspire, empower, and enact real change on a national scale. Confidence, once tentative and fragile, was now tempered with humility. I understood that leadership wasn't about ego, it was about service, vision, and unwavering commitment to doing what was right. And yet, even amidst all the success, there were moments of doubt. I wondered if I was moving too fast, if I was overextending, if the weight of expectation would eventually crush me. But each time I reminded myself of that night, the coat, the stranger, the choice to help, that simple act of compassion had ignited everything. If one small choice could change a life, then surely with intention and effort, I could continue to change many. The months following the national expansion were some of the most intense and transformative of my life. Suddenly, the Randall Institute wasn't just a city-level organization, it was a nationwide force with the capacity to touch thousands of lives. And with that growth came responsibility, scrutiny, and pressure I had never experienced before. Each day, I woke with a sense of purpose, tempered by an undercurrent of anxiety. Would our programs truly be effective? Could we sustain our rapid growth without losing the essence of what made us unique? Early mornings were filled with strategic briefings. Each department presented updates on their programs, highlighting successes and challenges. I noticed a recurring pattern. While numbers often looked promising on spreadsheets, the real human impact was more nuanced. For example, in a youth job training program in Chicago, the metrics showed 90% course completion. But after visiting the site and speaking directly with the students, I realized many were completing classes out of obligation rather than genuine engagement. The excitement and confidence I had hoped to instill were missing. This reminded me of those early days at the San Juan Job Training Center. Numbers were not enough. I began implementing a new approach. Each report had to include qualitative data. Stories, testimonials, observations from field visits. My team grumbled at first. It takes too long, one analyst complained, but I insisted. Numbers without context are meaningless. We're not just counting lives, we're transforming them. Slowly, they began to see the value in this perspective, and the results were profound. Programs became more responsive, adjustments were quicker, and communities felt heard and understood. Amid these professional challenges, my personal life evolved in unexpected ways. Matthew and I were growing closer, but I was cautious. Our shared mission and mutual respect had created a bond, but the world around us seemed ready to judge. 32 and 63, that age gap was glaring on paper. Friends and colleagues whispered behind closed doors. Family members were protective and skeptical. And yet, every time I looked at Matthew, I saw someone who valued me not for youth or appearance, but for experience, wisdom, and character. One evening, after a particularly grueling day coordinating programs in 4 different states, Matthew and I sat in his office overlooking the city skyline. The sun had dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the glass towers. "Do you ever wonder if people will ever understand us?" I asked quietly. He smiled, placing his hand gently over mine. "They don't need to understand us. They only need to see what we do together, the impact we create. That's all that matters." His words resonated deeply. The truth was, our work spoke louder than societal judgments ever could, and the more I immersed myself in the Institute's mission, the more I realized that validation from others was irrelevant compared to the fulfillment I felt when I saw lives genuinely change. But growth brought complications. Scaling programs nationally revealed systemic challenges I hadn't anticipated. Logistics were daunting. coordinating staff across time zones, ensuring compliance with varying local regulations, and managing budgets that now ran into tens of millions. We faced pushback from some local authorities who were resistant to external influence, and occasional criticism from media outlets questioning the efficiency and accountability of our programs. I learned to navigate these pressures with a mix of diplomacy, transparency, and decisiveness. One particularly tense moment occurred in Texas, where a community center we supported faced allegations of mismanagement. I flew in personally, conducted interviews with staff, volunteers, and beneficiaries, and spent 2 sleepless nights reviewing every document and report. The outcome was a mixture of truth and misconception. While some oversight lapses were real, the narrative in the media had exaggerated the issues. I implemented stricter protocols, retrained staff, and communicated openly with the public. The experience was exhausting, but it reinforced a critical lesson. Leadership meant confronting problems head-on, not avoiding them. Meanwhile, I was also navigating the complexities of family dynamics. My children, Paula, James, and Andrew, had varied reactions to my transformation. Paula was my staunch supporter, always encouraging me to embrace new opportunities and reminding me that I deserved happiness and purpose. James was cautious, worried that I was taking on too much too quickly and risking burnout. Andrew, ever the observer, was quietly proud but struggled to reconcile the mother he had known with the confident executive he now saw. One Sunday, during a rare quiet afternoon, the 3 of them gathered at my apartment. We sat around the kitchen table, talking candidly about my new life. "Mom," James began, his voice hesitant, "I get it. I see how happy you are, but aren't you scared? What if something goes wrong?" I smiled softly. "Of course I'm scared. Fear is part of growth, but I've learned that the alternative, never taking a risk, is far scarier. And every choice I make now is deliberate, not desperate. I'm not running from anything anymore." Paula chimed in, eyes sparkling. "You've inspired me, Mom. Seeing you transform like this, it's proof that life doesn't stop at any age. It keeps moving and we can choose how we ride it." Andrew nodded, quieter but affirming. That day, I felt the weight of their acceptance and support. I realized that personal fulfillment was intertwined with professional purpose and that both could coexist if nurtured thoughtfully. Professionally, we continued innovating. I introduced a mentorship program pairing seasoned professionals with young leaders from the communities we served. The idea was to create a bridge of knowledge and experience while fostering self-reliance and creativity. The results were astonishing. Entrepreneurs who initially lacked confidence began thriving, forming networks, and mentoring others themselves. The cycle of empowerment became self-sustaining, a living proof that genuine investment in people could ripple outward exponentially. One particularly moving experience involved a young man named Louis, who had grown up in a neglected neighborhood in Los Angeles. He had started a small food delivery business with our microcredit fund. At first, he struggled. Delivery delays, limited clientele, and logistical challenges threatened to shut him down. I visited him one morning, observing his operations, offering guidance, and connecting him with local resources. Over 6 months, his business grew exponentially, employing 4 other young people from his community. At our annual conference, Louis spoke publicly about the impact of our support. "You didn't just fund me," he said, voice breaking. "You believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself. You gave me dignity and hope." The room erupted in applause, but I felt tears sting my eyes. It was moments like these that made every challenge, every sleepless night worth it. Yet, even amidst success, emotional challenges persisted. Matthew and I continued to navigate the delicate balance between personal intimacy and professional collaboration. Our partnership was powerful but occasionally fraught with tension. Differences in decision-making styles, high-pressure scenarios, and the sheer intensity of our work sometimes led to disagreements. But we learned to resolve them through honest communication, patience, and mutual respect. Our love was not a fairy tale. It was forged through shared struggle, aligned values, and deep understanding. The weeks following the national expansion were a whirlwind of activity, emotions, and new responsibilities. The scale of what I had taken on at the Randall Institute was breathtaking. Every morning, I walked into the office feeling a mix of exhilaration and fear. With programs now running in nearly a dozen states, the weight of decisions, big and small, was constantly on my shoulders. Every choice I made could ripple through thousands of lives. I reminded myself daily that this wasn't about me, it was about the people whose potential we were unlocking. Early in the week, Matthew and I convened an emergency board meeting. One of our largest community centers in Detroit was facing a crisis. Miscommunication between local staff and contractors had resulted in a construction delay that left families without promised housing. Reports were scattered, emotions were high, and the media was starting to cover the story with a critical eye. I felt my pulse quicken as I prepared to speak. I took a deep breath and addressed the board. "We have a situation," I began, my voice calm but firm. "We can't ignore it and we can't deflect blame. Our responsibility is to the people we serve, not to our image." I outlined a plan to visit the site immediately, assess the problems firsthand, and engage directly with the affected families. Some board members looked uneasy. They were used to more hands-off approaches. But Matthew nodded encouragingly. He trusted me, and that trust gave me strength. The drive to Detroit was tense. As we approached the construction site, I could see families waiting, frustration evident on their faces. Children played in the muddy areas where the foundation of their new homes was supposed to be. I stepped out of the car and felt the cold wind on my face. The reality hit me harder than any report could. These were real people, real families, waiting for promises we hadn't fulfilled. I clenched my hands, reminding myself that leadership was not about comfort, it was about action. I spent hours walking through the site, speaking to contractors, staff, and families. It became clear that the delay wasn't malicious, but systemic. Mismanaged schedules, miscommunication, and a lack of oversight had compounded into a serious problem. I met Mrs. Alvarez, a mother of 4 who had been sleeping in cramped temporary housing for months. Her eyes met mine as she spoke. "We trusted you. We believed you when you said we'd have homes." My chest tightened. These were words I couldn't ignore or dismiss. By the end of the day, we had a plan. I coordinated with contractors to expedite construction, reassigned staff to ensure better communication, and promised the families weekly updates. Matthew stayed by my side throughout, offering support but allowing me to lead. That evening, as we drove back to our hotel, I felt a mix of exhaustion and relief. This was what leadership truly meant, not making decisions from an office, but being present where change mattered most. But even as we solved immediate crises, unexpected challenges arose. One morning, an anonymous tip arrived regarding financial discrepancies in one of our urban development programs in Chicago. The tip claimed misappropriation of funds, triggering an internal investigation. It was the first time in months that I felt true dread, not just responsibility. How could something like this happen under my leadership? I spent hours reviewing financial documents, speaking with accountants, and visiting the sites in question. The investigation revealed minor errors, not fraud, but the experience shook me. It reminded me that even the best intentions could falter without vigilance. I called an all-staff meeting to address the situation transparently. "Mistakes happen," I told them, "but accountability and honesty are non-negotiable. We must learn, adjust, and ensure this never happens again." I noticed nods of understanding, but also a lingering tension. Leadership required not only vision and empathy, but also unwavering integrity. Amid professional crises, Matthew and I continued to navigate our evolving personal relationship. Public scrutiny was a constant pressure, but it paled in comparison to the challenges of maintaining trust, intimacy, and communication amidst the intensity of our work. One late night, after reviewing program reports until past midnight, we sat in his office sipping coffee. "Do you ever think about the path that brought us here?" he asked quietly. I looked at him, tired but alive with purpose. "Every day," I admitted. "Sometimes I can't believe how far we've come, from a frozen bench in a park to leading a national initiative." He reached for my hand. "And you've changed everything, not just for the communities, but for me too. You reminded me that people still have goodness, still have heart, and that changes everything." I smiled, realizing that our connection had deepened beyond professional collaboration into a profound partnership rooted in shared values, empathy, and respect. Then came a moment that would test not just my leadership, but my emotional resilience. A storm had hit one of our rural housing projects in North Carolina, causing severe flooding that displaced dozens of families. I received the call early in the morning. Without hesitation, I boarded the first flight, accompanied by a small crisis response team. Arriving on site, the devastation was immediate. Homes were flooded, possessions ruined, and families traumatized. I went door to door, speaking with residents, listening to their fears and frustrations. I met a young father named Michael, who had lost nearly everything, and his 2 children who clung to him tightly. "We trusted you," he said, eyes brimming with tears. "We believed in this program, in you." I felt a surge of responsibility, and I promised him we would rebuild, improve, and ensure safety measures were stronger than ever. That day, I realized that leadership was inseparable from empathy, the ability to act decisively while remaining emotionally present for those you served. Back at the temporary command center, I worked through the night coordinating relief efforts, arranging temporary shelters, and securing emergency funds. Matthew and I slept only a few hours, driven by urgency and the knowledge that every moment mattered. By dawn, families had basic necessities, and reconstruction plans were in motion. Exhausted but determined, I understood a fundamental truth. The more responsibility I embraced, the greater the personal cost, but also the deeper the fulfillment. The months that followed were a whirlwind of victories, setbacks, and profound lessons. Programs flourished under our guidance, and communities began to thrive in ways that were measurable and heartfelt. We documented countless stories of transformation: children attending school regularly for the first time, entrepreneurs growing their businesses, families moving into safe, well-designed homes. Yet, despite these triumphs, internal challenges persisted. Board members debated priorities, staff struggled with burnout, and I had to continually balance my vision with the practical realities of national expansion. I learned to delegate effectively, empower local leaders, and trust my instincts. I also learned the delicate art of resilience, maintaining composure under scrutiny while remaining emotionally attuned to the human stories behind the work. And through it all, Matthew remained a steady presence. His support was unwavering, yet he encouraged me to develop independence and confidence in my decision-making. Our partnership was a delicate balance of professional respect and personal intimacy, each dimension enhancing the other. The world outside might question our age difference or our unconventional path, but in our shared mission, we found alignment, trust, and profound connection. The morning sunlight streamed through the glass walls of my office, and for the first time in weeks, I paused to breathe. I had grown accustomed to waking up with my mind already racing, programs to review, staff issues to resolve, community concerns to address. But today felt different. The weight of responsibility was still heavy, yet there was a spark of accomplishment in the air. We had reached a milestone. The Randall Microcredit Initiative had officially helped over 1,000 small entrepreneurs. I thought of each face, each story, each life quietly transformed, and yet I knew that with visibility came scrutiny. That afternoon, I received an email marked urgent. It was from a journalist at a national news magazine. They wanted an interview about the Institute and our rapid expansion. Matthew suggested we proceed carefully, and I agreed. It was not just about publicity. It was an opportunity to show the real impact of our work, to humanize philanthropy in a world often blinded by numbers. The interview was scheduled for the next morning, and I spent hours preparing. I rehearsed stories, reviewed data, and reminded myself that the people we served were the real heroes. The next day, the journalist arrived and the interview began. Questions ranged from budget management to program strategy, but I made sure to bring the focus back to human stories. I spoke of Maria, the seamstress whose business had grown beyond what she thought possible. I spoke of Raphael, the young man now a junior programmer. I spoke of families in North Carolina who had survived floods and found hope through our programs. By the end of the interview, the journalist's eyes were bright, reflecting the same emotion I felt while telling these stories. The article was published a week later, and the response was overwhelming. The piece highlighted the transformative power of empathy-driven leadership and the importance of seeing people, not just statistics. Donations increased, new partnerships formed, and the Institute's visibility grew beyond our expectations. But as the applause of the public swelled, a subtle, darker challenge emerged: jealousy, resentment, and even betrayal from unexpected quarters. One morning, I was summoned to a meeting with two senior staff members I had trusted implicitly. They sat across from me, their expressions tight, almost fearful. "Sarah, we need to discuss your recent decisions," one began. "Some of your changes, while well-intentioned, have created confusion and strain. Staff morale is uneven, and some projects are behind schedule." I listened carefully, reminding myself that leadership often required hearing difficult truths. I asked for specifics, expecting logistical issues. But what came next caught me off guard. "There's concern that your rapid approach is bypassing traditional checks and balances," the other staff member said, "and some board members are worried your visibility is overshadowing the organization itself." My pulse quickened. I had anticipated challenges, but betrayal from those I trusted felt different. The sense of being undermined, subtly and strategically, stung more than any failure. I realized that leadership at this level came with a price. Not everyone would celebrate your success, and some might actively resist it. Matthew noticed my tension that evening. "What happened?" he asked as we reviewed program reports in his office. I explained the meeting, the insinuations, the undercurrents of jealousy. He leaned back, thoughtful. "Sarah, what you're experiencing is normal for someone who leads boldly. Not everyone can handle change, and some people feel threatened by it. Your job is not to be liked, it's to be effective." His words grounded me. I knew he was right. Leadership was lonely at times, and navigating internal politics required strategy, patience, and emotional intelligence. Determined to address the issue constructively, I called a staff meeting the following morning. I spoke openly about the concerns raised, acknowledging the strain while emphasizing our mission. We are here to serve communities, not internal hierarchies, I said. Each decision we make should be guided by impact, not comfort. Mistakes can happen, but avoidance and resistance are unacceptable when people's lives are at stake. Some staff members shifted uncomfortably, but many nodded in agreement. I could sense the shift, loyalty, and alignment were slowly reasserting themselves. Yet professional challenges were only part of the storm. My personal life had begun to feel a subtle strain under the intensity of my work. Matthew and I shared deep affection and partnership, but long hours, travel, and the emotional weight of our programs tested our connection. One evening, after an exhausting day of visiting flood-affected areas, we sat silently in the car, parked near a small diner. I feel like I'm losing myself in all this, I admitted softly, staring at the dashboard lights. I love what we do, I love the impact we're making, but I also need moments to just be Sarah, not Sarah the leader, Sarah the decision maker. Matthew reached for my hand, squeezing it gently. I understand, he said, but remember, you've never been just one thing. Your strength is that you can lead and love, act decisively, and remain compassionate. Balance isn't about less work, it's about integrating all the parts of you. His words were comforting, but the reality remained. I needed to guard my personal life even as I expanded my professional influence. Then came a day that tested everything I had learned about courage, empathy, and resilience. A community center we had funded in Texas was facing a potential closure due to political pushback and budget cuts. Families had grown dependent on our programs, and the local staff looked to us for support. The pressure was immense. I spent hours on calls with government officials, community leaders, and donors, negotiating, advocating, and strategizing. Exhaustion threatened to overtake me, but every time I thought of the families at stake, I found renewed energy. I flew to Texas to meet with the families directly. Walking into the center, I saw children in their classrooms, volunteers organizing events, and families waiting for guidance. I listened to their concerns, documented their needs, and worked with local leaders to create a sustainable plan that would secure funding, retain staff, and preserve programs. By the end of the day, I had not only stabilized the center, but also strengthened community trust and engagement. I realized that true leadership required direct involvement, unwavering advocacy, and the courage to face political, bureaucratic, and emotional challenges head-on. Amidst these professional trials, Matthew and I continued to grow as a couple. He often reminded me that our bond was a partnership, not a hierarchy. He respected my authority, celebrated my victories, and offered comfort in moments of doubt. One evening, as we sat overlooking the city skyline from the Institute's top floor, he turned to me with a soft smile. "Do you ever think about how far you've come?" he asked. I nodded. "Every day," I replied. "Sometimes I can hardly believe it. From feeling discarded and hopeless to leading a national initiative, changing lives and finding love again." He reached out, holding my hand warmly. "You've shown everyone, especially yourself, that courage, compassion, and vision are timeless. Age, past pain, and setbacks are irrelevant when you choose to act with heart." As the months rolled on, the Institute thrived and our personal partnership strengthened. Recognition continued to pour in, from awards, media features, and national invitations to speak about social entrepreneurship and empathy-driven leadership. But with recognition came reflection. I understood that success was not about accolades. It was about sustainability, impact, and ensuring that every decision honored the dignity of the people we served. Yet life, as always, had one more unexpected test in store. One evening, a confidential report arrived alleging ethical concerns about one of our most high-profile partnerships. It was subtle, almost insidious, implying favoritism and mismanagement without direct evidence. The accusation could damage our reputation, and I felt the familiar tension in my chest, the fear of failure, the weight of responsibility. I reminded myself that leadership meant facing uncertainty with integrity, transparency, and resolve. I convened a private meeting with Matthew and senior staff to review the allegations carefully. As we sifted through emails, contracts, and communications, patterns emerged. There were mistakes, yes, but no malfeasance. Still, the situation demanded a thoughtful response. I drafted a comprehensive report, conducted interviews with everyone involved, and prepared a public statement that acknowledged errors while reinforcing our unwavering commitment to ethical and impactful work. By the time the statement was released, transparency had won trust, and our credibility remained intact. But the experience left me emotionally drained and acutely aware of the constant vigilance leadership required. Through every trial, recognition, betrayal, and moment of self-doubt, one truth crystallized. Leadership was not a title or a position. It was a responsibility, a moral imperative, and a daily commitment to courage, empathy, and unwavering integrity. And as I looked around at the communities we served, the faces of families, children, and entrepreneurs reflecting hope and resilience, I knew that every sacrifice, sleepless night, and personal challenge was worth it. The morning air was crisp as I walked into the Randall Institute, a sense of anticipation humming through the halls. The past year had been nothing short of transformative. Programs had expanded, lives had been changed, and the Institute's reputation had grown from a respected local entity into a nationally recognized beacon of empathetic philanthropy. Yet, even with all this success, a new challenge loomed, one that would demand more than vision or compassion. It would require courage, decisiveness, and the deepest part of my character. I entered Matthew's office where he was already reviewing a stack of new proposals. His face lit up when he saw me. "Good morning, Sarah. We have a visitor from Washington," he said. My curiosity piqued. I asked who it was. "A senior advisor from the National Philanthropy Council. They've been following our work and want to discuss replicating our model on a national scale." My heart raced. This was more than recognition. It was an opportunity to influence the entire country, to scale impact beyond anything I had ever imagined. The meeting was scheduled for that afternoon. As I waited, I reflected on my journey. Only a year ago, I had felt discarded, hopeless, and invisible. I had been Robert's wife, confined by routine, my identity reduced to roles that no longer fulfilled me. And yet, through moments of courage, empathy, and persistence, I had discovered a new self, Sarah, a leader, a changemaker, a woman who could face fear and transform it into action. The advisor arrived promptly. She was tall, poised, with a commanding presence that made the room feel smaller in her aura. "Miss Sarah, we've been following the Randall Institute's work closely," she began. "Your approach is revolutionary, not just funding programs, but embedding empathy and community engagement into the very DNA of your initiatives. We want to explore how your model can be scaled nationally." I listened carefully, absorbing the weight of the opportunity. Scaling meant more staff, more budgets, and more scrutiny. It meant balancing the human-centered approach with the complexity of national oversight, yet excitement surged through me. This was precisely why I had chosen this path, to make a meaningful difference, to reach further than I ever dreamed. Over the next few weeks, discussions intensified. I led planning sessions, developed strategic frameworks, and outlined practical steps for expansion. Matthew was my steadfast partner, offering guidance and support, yet giving me the space to lead decisively. The staff rallied, inspired by the possibility of influencing the nation, and we began laying the groundwork for what would become a transformative national initiative. Amidst the professional whirlwind, personal life demanded attention as well. Matthew and I had settled into a rhythm, blending partnership and affection with our shared mission. Yet the intensity of work sometimes left little space for reflection, and moments of doubt crept in. One evening, after a particularly grueling day of meetings and negotiations, I found myself alone on the balcony, staring at the city lights below. "Are you okay?" Matthew's voice startled me. He joined me quietly, standing close but giving me room. "I am," I said, though my mind was racing. "It's just so much responsibility. I've never done anything on this scale before. What if I fail?" He took my hand gently. "Sarah, you've already faced worse than national scrutiny. You've faced loss, betrayal, and doubt, and you turned all of it into strength. This is just another challenge, one I know you can rise to." That night, I slept uneasily, my dreams filled with visions of community centers, small business owners, children learning in bright classrooms, and families smiling with hope. I woke determined to make the vision real. As we began national implementation, we faced logistical hurdles, hiring staff across multiple states, navigating complex funding regulations, and ensuring that our human-centered philosophy remained intact amid bureaucracy. Each day brought new challenges, but also new stories that fueled my drive. In Kentucky, we discovered a rural community where access to basic education had been minimal. We established a pilot program, meeting children who had never seen a computer before. The joy and curiosity in their eyes reminded me why I had embarked on this journey. In New Mexico, a small cooperative of artisans struggled to market their goods beyond their local town. We provided training, microloans, and connections to larger markets. One woman, Rosa, had tears in her eyes as she explained that she could now send her children to school and save for their future. These moments, multiplied hundreds of times, were the true measure of success. But with growth came scrutiny and criticism. Some national commentators questioned our unconventional methods. "Too much emphasis on emotions, not enough on efficiency," one article claimed. Another accused us of being naive, suggesting that communities couldn't be trusted to lead their own development. I read these criticisms carefully, reflecting on their content without letting them undermine our mission. Criticism, I reminded myself, was a sign that we were making waves. Change rarely comes without resistance. during one intense week, a major donor called with concerns about budget allocation. They questioned why funds were being directed toward mentorship programs and community workshops rather than tangible infrastructure. I took a deep breath, preparing to defend our philosophy. Impact isn't just about buildings, I said firmly. It's about empowering people to use what they have to grow, to create sustainable change. Mentorship and education amplify every dollar spent on infrastructure. We're building resilience, not just structures. After a pause, the donor agreed, though I sensed a lingering skepticism. Meanwhile, the Institute's rapid growth demanded innovation in management. I implemented systems that allowed local managers to report directly from the field, capturing real-time data and human stories simultaneously. We used technology to track impact, but never allowed it to replace personal engagement. Every program visit, every conversation with beneficiaries reminded me of the core principle: seeing people, not numbers. Amidst all this professional focus, I faced a personal challenge I hadn't anticipated. Robert reached out again. This time it wasn't to reconcile. It was a subtle, almost manipulative attempt to re-enter my life. "Sarah," he wrote in an email, "I've realized the mistake I made. You've changed and I want to reconnect. Can we talk?" I stared at the screen, heart pounding but also steady. I knew the answer. The life I had built, the purpose I had discovered, and the woman I had become could not be undone by old mistakes. I typed a brief reply: "Robert, my path is clear. I wish you well, but I cannot go back. My life, my choices, and my purpose are mine now." That clarity brought peace, but also a renewed sense of urgency. Time was finite, and the opportunity to create national impact was now. Every decision, every plan, every interaction mattered. I began traveling across the country, meeting local leaders, mentoring emerging changemakers, and ensuring the Institute's philosophy remained consistent at every level. In one particularly emotional trip to Chicago, I met a single mother named Angela. She had lost her home in a fire and was struggling to rebuild her life. Through our microcredit program, she started a small catering business. Sitting with her in her modest kitchen, listening to her describe the joy of providing for her children and contributing to her community, I felt an overwhelming sense of fulfillment. This was the reason for sleepless nights, criticism, and endless travel. This was the human heartbeat behind every decision. Yet even as success mounted, I understood that the work was never complete. Each milestone was a stepping stone, each success a call to push further. The national program was thriving, but I knew there were still communities unseen, families unheard, and children whose potential remained untapped. Leadership, I realized, was not a destination. It was a journey, a relentless pursuit of betterment for others. By the end of the year, the national initiative had reached 20 states, touching tens of thousands of lives. Media recognition followed, including awards for innovation in philanthropy and leadership excellence. Yet amidst the accolades, I remained grounded, continually reminding myself and my team that the true reward was in the transformation we fostered every day. Late one evening, as I walked through the empty halls of the Institute, I reflected on how far I had come. From a woman who felt invisible and discarded to a national leader changing lives with every decision, my journey had been extraordinary. But beyond professional success, the most profound change was personal. I had discovered strength, courage, compassion, and the power of acting with purpose. I had learned that life's greatest opportunities often arrive disguised as challenges, and that the essence of true fulfillment lies in service, empathy, and unwavering belief in human potential. Just as I was about to leave for the night, my phone rang. It was Matthew calling from home. "Sarah, we need to talk about something important," he said, a hint of excitement in his voice. I knew instinctively that whatever awaited, it would be another turning point, another challenge, another chance to grow, another story in a life that had been remade entirely. And deep down, I felt ready. The morning sun streamed through the glass walls of the Randall Institute as I arrived at work, my mind buzzing with anticipation. It had been an incredible journey, and yet I felt that something monumental was about to happen. The national expansion had been a resounding success, but deep down, I knew that the story wasn't complete until I could see the full circle of impact, the true transformation in the lives of those we were helping. As I entered Matthew's office, he greeted me with a smile that carried a mixture of pride and excitement. "Sarah, today is the day," he said, handing me a folder. Inside were letters, photographs, and reports from across the country, stories of lives touched, businesses transformed, children inspired, and communities rebuilt. Each page told a story, each photograph captured hope, and each letter reflected gratitude that was deeply personal. I felt tears prick at the corners of my eyes as I read through them, realizing the magnitude of what we had achieved. The board had called an emergency meeting to announce the next phase of our initiative. They wanted to expand the Institute's reach even further, introducing a mentorship program for young leaders from underprivileged communities. These leaders would not only participate in projects, but also take active roles in shaping programs, ensuring that the work remained authentic, community-driven, and impactful. Sitting at the long mahogany table, I felt the weight of responsibility settle on my shoulders. The board members looked to me not just for approval, but for vision. I took a deep breath and outlined my plan, emphasizing the importance of empowering local leaders to take charge. "This is about sustainability," I said, my voice steady. "It's about creating a ripple effect that doesn't end when we leave. True change happens when communities lead their own transformation." The board members nodded, visibly impressed. Matthew squeezed my hand under the table, his silent encouragement grounding me as I presented the strategy. After hours of discussion, approvals were given, budgets allocated, and timelines set. It was official, the Randall Institute would now operate nationwide with programs guided by community leaders at every level. But even as the professional achievements mounted, I found myself reflecting on personal growth. The woman who had once sat alone on a frozen bench, feeling discarded and hopeless, was now at the helm of a national initiative, influencing thousands of lives. I had discovered resilience, courage, and the extraordinary power of empathy. More importantly, I had learned to see myself, not just as someone's wife, mother, or employee, but as a leader, a changemaker, and a woman with boundless potential. Over the next few months, our work intensified. I traveled to remote towns, urban centers, and rural communities, meeting with young leaders who were now piloting programs in their neighborhoods. I witnessed astonishing stories, schools where attendance had doubled because children felt valued, small businesses thriving where there had once been no opportunity, and families finding stability after years of struggle. Each success was a reminder that vision combined with empathy could change the world. One day, while visiting a small town in Alabama, I met a young man named David. He had grown up in a violent neighborhood, his potential long overlooked. Through our mentorship program, he started a community youth center, providing safe spaces for children and teens. Watching him teach life skills, organize educational workshops, and inspire confidence in young minds, I felt a profound sense of fulfillment. This was the ultimate reward, not the statistics, the awards, or even media recognition, but the tangible impact on human lives. Amidst this national expansion, Matthew and I also nurtured our personal bond. Our relationship had grown from shared mission to deep companionship, rooted in respect, trust, and genuine love. We celebrated victories together, supported each other through challenges, and found joy in the simple moments of connection. Laughter over dinner, quiet walks through the city, and shared dreams for the future. His unwavering belief in me had been a cornerstone of my journey, and I found myself equally inspired by his vision and integrity. Yet not everything was seamless. Scaling nationally meant dealing with complex logistical challenges, unforeseen setbacks, and moments of doubt. One particularly stressful week involved a critical funding review. A major donor questioned our resource allocation, concerned that the mentorship program might stretch our finances too thin. I met with them personally, presenting data, impact stories, and firsthand accounts from community leaders. I emphasized that investing in human potential had exponential returns, more profound than numbers could capture. After a tense discussion, the donor agreed to continue support, acknowledging that the program's success warranted the investment. Despite these challenges, each hurdle reinforced the importance of my approach. I had learned that leadership was not about avoiding obstacles, but about confronting them with integrity, empathy, and strategic thinking. I had also learned that fear was not a signal to retreat, but a compass pointing toward growth. By the end of the year, the Institute's impact was undeniable. Reports showed measurable improvements in education, employment, community health, and overall well-being in the regions where our programs operated. Testimonials from beneficiaries revealed stories of empowerment, self-reliance, and renewed hope. The media spotlighted our success, calling it a model for compassionate, effective philanthropy. I was invited to speak at national conferences, sharing insights and inspiring other leaders to adopt a human-centered approach. Amidst this whirlwind of achievement, I took time to reflect on the journey that had brought me here. The Christmas Eve that had shattered my old life now seemed like a pivotal turning point. Robert's departure, once a source of pain and despair, had ultimately led me to discover my true purpose. Meeting Matthew, taking risks, embracing leadership, and dedicating myself to service had transformed not just my life, but the lives of countless others. On a quiet evening, I sat alone in my office, reviewing letters from program beneficiaries. Children thanking us for after-school programs, families sharing stories of financial independence, young leaders expressing gratitude for mentorship. all these words were a testament to the power of empathy, vision, and courage. I realized that true fulfillment was not in recognition or status, but in knowing that one's actions had made a lasting difference in the lives of others. Then came the moment I had been waiting for, the official launch of the Randall National Leadership Initiative. The event was held in a grand auditorium, with representatives from communities across the country, national media, and key stakeholders. As I stepped onto the stage, the applause was overwhelming. Faces in the audience reflected the very essence of my journey: children, young leaders, parents, and community members whose lives had been transformed. I spoke from the heart, sharing my story, the lessons I had learned, and the vision for a future where empathy guided action. I spoke about the power of second chances, the courage to embrace change, and the importance of seeing people, not just statistics. I highlighted the achievements of our programs and the incredible potential of the communities we served. Each word resonated, not just as a leader addressing an audience, but as a human being sharing a journey of resilience, hope, and transformation. After the speech, a young woman approached me, tears in her eyes. "Miss Sarah," she said, "I was in foster care, feeling invisible and hopeless. Your programs gave me confidence, support, and a path to leadership. You've changed my life." Her words struck me deeply. This was the moment that crystallized everything: the purpose, the struggle, the courage, the journey. I realized that every challenge I had faced, every risk I had taken, had led to this profound impact. Later, as I walked through the auditorium, I caught sight of Matthew. He smiled, proud and supportive, his hand reaching for mine. We stood together, observing the energy, joy, and hope that radiated from every corner. This was more than success, it was a legacy in the making. A life rebuilt, a purpose realized, and a future illuminated for countless others. As the evening drew to a close, I reflected on the extraordinary transformation of my life. From a discarded wife to a national leader, I had learned the true power of empathy, courage, and vision. I had discovered that age is never a barrier to purpose, that setbacks can be catalysts for growth, and that genuine impact is measured not by accolades, but by lives touched and transformed. In the quiet aftermath of the launch, I stood by the window of my office, looking out over the city skyline. The journey had been long, challenging, and often terrifying, but it had led me to a place of fulfillment, purpose, and profound joy. I knew that the work was far from over, but I also knew that I was equipped, empowered, and ready to continue making a difference. And in that moment, I understood the ultimate truth. Life's most meaningful achievements come not from what we receive, but from what we give: our time, our empathy, our courage, and our unwavering belief in the potential of others. The Christmas Eve that had once destroyed me had, in the end, remade me into someone stronger, wiser, and more alive than I had ever been. I was no longer Sarah, the woman left behind. I was Sarah, the woman who had risen, led, and transformed lives, and in doing so had truly found herself.